Room 9 had been empty for 3 hours, the morning light falling across a bed that no longer held a patient. On the bed lay a folded army dress uniform, its ribbon bars catching the sun. Patricia Walton stood in the doorway, a grief settling deep in her chest. For 4 years, she had walked into this room every single morning to change his bandages. She read him the newspaper, even though he never answered, never even looked at her most days. His chart read only John D. No next of kin, no service record, just a name that felt like a placeholder. An envelope with a red arrow sat on his uniform, placed there by someone she had never met. He died on a Tuesday, and the funeral notice arrived on Department of Defense letterhead with no explanation. She went to Arlington in her scrubs, planning to leave for her shift afterward. Instead, 6 rows of 4-star generals and admirals filed past the metal detectors to honor a man she only knew as John. 4 years earlier, Patricia had walked into room 9 for the very first time, a new CNA with a cart full of supplies and a heart full of hope.
Good morning, Mr. D. I am Patricia, your nurse. I'll be taking care of you. They're saying the drought on the eastern shore might break by Thursday. Can you believe that? A whole summer without rain.
He didn't turn his head, didn't shift his eyes, like talking to a stone. His chart was nearly empty, redacted lines where his medical history should have been, like someone had taken a black marker to his past. The charge nurse said, "He's a vegetable. Just chart him and move on." No one knew anything about him, and no one seemed to care.
Talk to him anyway. Even if he can't answer, maybe he can hear.
Every morning after that, she read him the front page, the obituaries, the weather. She talked about her day, the traffic, the hospital rumors. She held his hand once, feeling the calluses of a laborer or a soldier. 4 years passed like that. Winter to spring, summer to fall, and in all that time, he never spoke a single word. She began to notice things. A finger twitch when she mentioned the Orioles, a head turn toward the window when birds sang.
He's in there. I can feel it. Trapped, but listening.
The first winter, she changed the bandage on his arm every morning, talking about the snow.
My daughter got the lead in the school play, Hamlet. She's nervous, but I told her she'd be brilliant.
Doctors called him a vegetable. Nurses said he was gone. Only Patricia spoke as if he could answer.
He hears me. I am not crazy. He hears every word I say.
One rainy afternoon, holding his hand, she felt a gentle pressure back. He was holding on. Once, after she read a letter from a veteran, a single tear rolled down his cheek.
You are not gone. You are trapped in there, but you are not gone.
Year after year the silence held. But Patricia's certainty grew. She was his only witness. On a Tuesday in March, Patricia pushed open the door to room 9 and felt it before she saw him. He lay still, his chest not rising. The monitor was flat. She pressed her hand to his forehead and felt the coolness of death.
He's gone after all this time. I wasn't here when he left.
She sat with him a long while, holding his hand, as if waiting for the gentle pressure she once knew. The death was processed with brutal efficiency. A form, a call to the morgue, no family to notify. 2 days later, a letter arrived on Department of Defense letterhead, addressed to her. It was a funeral notice for John D. at Arlington National Cemetery. Only a time and a chapel number, no explanation. She turned the letter over, searching for a contact, a reason why the military would bury a forgotten VA patient at Arlington.
Who was he really? And why are they burying him at Arlington?
She didn't know, but she put on her scrubs, swapped her shift, and drove to Arlington on a gray Tuesday morning. She drove through Arlington's gates, following black government SUVs she'd never seen at a funeral for a forgotten patient. The chapel was small, white, nearly empty. She sat in the back, scrubs conspicuous among polished brass. A few murmured, but she knew no one. John D. had never had a single visitor in 4 years. She clasped her hands, afraid she'd misunderstood the notice, that this was all some bureaucratic error. Then the doors opened, and a column of officers filed past metal detectors. Stars glinting on shoulders, 4-star generals, admirals, senators, 6 full rows of them filled the pews like a tide of authority. Patricia stopped breathing. The Joint Chiefs had been waiting for him to die while she read him the weather. A tall general with silver hair and 4 stars strode to the lectern, eyes scanning the room as if counting the missing.
Who were you, John? Who were you really?
The service began, but Patricia barely heard it. Everything she had known about Room 9 was a lie. The service ended with a rifle volley and a lone bugle. As the crowd dispersed, the tall general approached her.
Mrs. Walton, I am General Marcus Witt, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. May I speak with you? You've been caring for Sergeant First Class Joseph Kincaid, the last surviving member of Operation Silent Thunder.
A classified deep cover unit in Vietnam. His real name had been redacted from every record. The Pentagon waited for his death to declassify.
Before he passed, he made arrangements. He wanted you to have this.
Patricia took the envelope. Her hands trembled, the paper heavy with a final message from a man who never spoke.
He couldn't speak, but he found a way. It's all in there.
He wrote to me? All those years. He was composing a letter in his mind.
General Witt gave a curt nod and walked back toward the waiting officers, leaving her alone with a sealed secret. She stood in the autumn air, the envelope clutched against her chest. Realizing that John Dee had been far from silent, she found a stone bench outside the chapel and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside lay a Distinguished Service Cross on a blue ribbon and a folded letter. The letter was handwritten, dated months ago. John Dee had been dictating it. If you are reading this, I am gone. I could never speak, but I heard every word you said.
He heard me. All those years, he heard every single word.
The doctors called me a vegetable. You called me by name. You gave me the weather. Your daughter's Hamlet. A world outside that room. I dictated this letter, line by line. You were my only voice. Use mine now.
Use his voice? What does he expect me to do?
She held the medal and the letter, the weight of a dying soldier's last command pressing against her heart. That night, in her apartment, Patricia sat at the kitchen table and read the letter again, studying every word. Redacted lines blacked out entire missions. His name, his unit, decades of service compressed into a few handwritten pages.
He trusted me. A man whose own country buried his identity under black ink, and he gave his final words to me.
She glanced at a framed photo of John in his uniform, the only picture she'd managed to dig up from his file.
He was someone, a hero, and he spent 4 years trapped in that bed with only me to listen.
The medal lay on the table, gleaming. It was a command, not a gift. Use my voice.
How? I am just a CNA. I don't have power. I don't have connections, but he chose me. He dictated that letter, knowing I was his only witness. I can't let that die.
The Joint Chiefs had waited for him to die so they could declassify his service. She was the only person who knew him living. She folded the letter carefully, the weight of his command settling into her bones. She would find a way. The next morning, Patricia dialed the number on the Department of Defense letterhead.
General Witt, this is Patricia Walton. I need to speak about Sergeant Kincaid.
Mrs. Walton, that matter is highly classified. I am not at liberty to discuss it further.
He dictated a letter to me. He asked me to use his voice. I intend to do that before the Senate.
You have more courage than most officers I know. I'll arrange a closed hearing.
She hung up, her hand shaking. A hearing. The words felt too large for someone who changed bandages for a living. That evening, she sat at her desk and began writing, the medal and letter beside her.
What do I know about testifying? I change bandages.
But she kept writing, pulling lines from his letter, building a case for the forgotten. 2 weeks later, she stood outside the Senate office building, a nurse in scrubs about to speak for a dead soldier. The day before the hearing, Patricia walked back into room 9 for the first time since he died. The bed was stripped, the window bare, but the room still smelled of him, of silence and waiting.
I sat here every morning for 4 years, Now I am supposed to speak for you in front of the world.
She closed her eyes and imagined him in the chair, an unseen aide holding the pen as he dictated each word.
I promise, John. I will use your voice. I will not let them forget. He gave me his medal, his letter, his final command. I have to honor it.
The words on the page were his, but the strength to speak them had to be hers. She opened her eyes. The weight still there, but now something else. A piece of iron. She touched the doorframe, a goodbye to the silence, then walked out. The next day, she would walk into the Senate, carrying a dead soldier's voice in her throat. She passed through security, then stepped into the hearing room. High ceilings and dark wood pressing down like authority made visible. She sat at the witness table, a small nurse in scrubs facing a semicircle of America's most powerful military chiefs.
Don't look at their stars. Just remember him.
The committee chairman administered the oath, and she raised her right hand, the words feeling heavier than any I do.
Patricia Walton, CNA, Virginia Hospital, Maryland.
Her voice was steady, but thin, like a radio signal from very far away. She unfolded her statement, the paper trembling despite the iron she'd found in room 9.
I am here to speak for a man who could not speak for himself.
She looked up at the senators' faces, unreadable, carved from decades of classified briefings. The hearing room fell silent, every general and senator waiting to hear what a nurse knew about a soldier they had buried in secret. She began reading directly from his letter, the words that had been trapped inside him for 4 years.
The doctors called me a vegetable. You called me by name. You gave me the weather, my daughter's Hamlet, a world outside that room.
She held up the Distinguished Service Cross, the blue ribbon catching the sterile light.
This was his final communication. He dictated it line by line, even when they said he was gone.
She described the years of silence, the neglect of classified veterans, the system that erased men like John D. One senator, an older woman with pinned-back silver hair, wiped a tear from the corner of her eye.
He was my only patient. He needs to be the last forgotten.
The room was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the recording equipment. She folded her statement and set the medal on the witness table, its meaning heavy in the silence. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the chairman cleared his throat. After the hearing, a senior senator pulled Patricia aside. Your testimony has sparked a bill, but prepare for a fight. Patricia nodded, feeling the shift from witness to catalyst. The fight ahead was real now. She walked out into the gray afternoon, the medal in her pocket and no guarantee. Back at the VA, she signed in for her shift, as if she hadn't just testified before the Joint Chiefs. Everything looked the same. Fluorescent lights, bleach smell. But she was different.
He's still dead. The bill might die too. I am back to cleaning rooms.
She passed room 9, the door closed, the number plate unchanged. Weeks passed. Newspapers debated. The Joint Chiefs stayed silent. Then a call, a second hearing, a committee vote. The bill was alive, limping but alive. She sat in her scrubs, the weight of John's legacy balanced on a few pages of legislation. Months passed. The John D. Act became a media fixture. Patricia's face appeared on evening news segments between commercials. She was called to a second hearing, more public now. Cameras at every door. She wore the same scrubs, the medal in her pocket.
He was a soldier who sacrificed everything, and we left him in a bed without a name. That must change.
Bipartisan senators signed on, one by one. The whip count climbed, and the air thickened with hope. At her kitchen table, she watched a news anchor announce the scheduled vote. The caption read, John D. Act heads to final vote.
It's really happening. He might actually change things.
General Witt called, his voice grave. You've done what we couldn't. Now it's in the Senate's hands. She thanked him, then hung up, feeling the full weight of the unknown outcome. The night before the vote, she ironed her uniform for work, her movements slow and deliberate. Tomorrow, the Senate would decide whether one nurse's promise would become law. Patricia sat at the nurse's station, the television tuned to C-SPAN, her shift forgotten. The roll call vote dragged on. a litany of aye and nay that felt like a heartbeat. When the gavel fell and the final tally flashed on screen, she couldn't breathe. The screen flashed. The John D. Act passes, 89-11. It was law.
He did it. He actually changed the world from that bed.
She walked outside into the thin winter light, tears cutting lines down her cheeks, and she didn't wipe them. General Witt found her on a bench, the metal pressed between her palms. He handed her a formal letter, the invitation to the White House signing ceremony.
For him. I'll go for him.
The law was real now, but she would carry the medal there and his voice. After the White House signing ceremony, Patricia returned to the VA. A crowd had gathered in the corridor outside room 9. A covered plaque hung on the door. She walked toward it, the medal in her pocket feeling heavier than ever. She pulled the cloth away. The brass plate read, "The Patricia Walton Room." She flinched. It should have been his name, not hers. She touched the letters, tracing the P.
They don't understand. This room was his prison. It should bear his name.
She turned to face the audience, the Distinguished Service Cross held tight in her hand.
Thank you. But this room isn't mine. It belongs to Sergeant Joseph Kincaid and every soldier who was silenced.
She held up the medal. He gave me his voice. This room is him. The hallway erupted in applause, a sound that John never heard in all those years. She looked at the plaque, then at the medal, and finally nodded. His voice had built this. Now it would echo in every VA. The crowd dispersed, and Patricia stood alone in the renamed room, the silence heavy as a held breath. On the wall, a glass case now held his folded uniform, the Distinguished Service Cross, and the envelope, preserved like relics. She pressed her palm flat against the cool glass, tracing the outline of the uniform she had folded 100 times.
I changed your bandages every morning, John. I never knew you were changing me.
The sun through the window fell exactly where his bed used to be, a square of light on bare linoleum.
You were never just a patient. You were a lesson in how to listen.
She took out the medal from her pocket one last time, held it to her chest, then placed it gently inside the case beside his letter. She closed the glass door, sealing his legacy inside the room where it all began.
Rest now, Sergeant Kincaid. I'll carry your voice until mine gives out.
She turned off the light, leaving the room in dusk, the glass case the only thing left glowing. In the dusk of the room, she remembered a rainy afternoon, one winter when she sat by his bed reading a letter from a young soldier who had heard about John.
He wrote, "Sir, I am a private in Afghanistan. I heard you served in Vietnam. I want you to know I am proud of you."
John's hand twitched. Then, a single tear escaped his eye and disappeared into the pillow, the first movement she'd seen in months.
He's in there. He hears every word.
She squeezed his hand, and he squeezed back, a language without words. Now, in the renamed room, she stared at the medal under glass, knowing that tear was the first draft of his final letter.
I didn't know it then, but he was already dictating.
The sun had nearly set, the room now dark, except for the case's spotlight.
You spoke, John. It just took the world 4 years to listen.
She stepped back from the case, her reflection ghosted in the glass, and for a moment, she wasn't alone. The next morning, an envelope with a Fort Benning postmark waited in her VA mailbox.
Another letter. They come almost every week now.
She slid it open under the brass plaque of the renamed room. Dear Mrs. Walton, I am a corporal in the infantry. The John D. Act means I can finally seek help for the things I saw. He wrote, I never thought a nurse could change the whole VA. Thank you for fighting for us.
I didn't change it. John did. I just opened my mouth.
She borrowed a pen from the nurse's station and wrote back on hospital stationery.
Tell him about John, the soldier who taught me how to listen.
She mailed the letter, the medal's presence a phantom weight in her pocket. Then she walked down the VA corridor, past the plaque, toward her next patient, carrying John's voice forward. On a Sunday afternoon, Patricia drove back to Arlington alone. the late sun slanting gold across the endless white stones. She found the grave among the newer section. His real name was on the stone now. SGT Joseph Kincaid.
Hello, John.
She knelt, the grass damp, and laid the corporal's letter against the stone, a small flower next to it. The Distinguished Service Cross was no longer in her pocket. It rested in the glass case at the VA, but his voice was here.
I kept my promise, Joseph. I used your voice. You changed the VA. You changed the whole country. A nurse in scrubs just read the newspaper.
She stayed until the sun melted behind the hills, the stone warm under her hand. Then she stood, brushed the grass from her knees, and walked away through the rows of the honored dead. The wind carried the sound of a distant bugle, and Patricia Walton carried John's voice home. Morning light fell on the folded uniform in the glass case of the silent room. The brass plaque caught the sun, a permanent reminder of one nurse's promise. Inside the case, the cross and letter lay side by side, his voice sealed forever. The renovated wing bustled. Nurses now paused to speak to those who could not answer. Patricia still walked the halls, wearing her pin, reading the news to those who listened. The John D. Act had passed, but the real change lived in these quiet moments. Room 9 echoed now, the voice of a soldier who taught a nurse to listen. On the wall, the folded uniform remained, a permanent symbol of invisible sacrifice. The sun set through the window, casting the same light where John once lay. Patricia would never forget the soldier who could not speak, but whose voice now filled the VA. She passed the brass plaque each morning now, a small, peaceful smile settling on her face. At the end of the hall, she paused before a new patient's door. Then she walked into the room where another silent man lay waiting. The caduceus pin on her collar glinted as she bent to check his vitals. Across the hospital, in the renamed room, the folded uniform rested in its glass case. The Distinguished Service Cross and the letter lay beside it, sealed forever, but his voice still echoed. In that room, the sun fell on the bed where he once lay, now a place of memory. Patricia's voice carried his into every room she entered. The uniform remained, a permanent symbol of invisible sacrifice. And in the VA hospital, a nurse continued to listen, to speak, to never forget.